2, 1. Hello, folks. Welcome to Radio FM 88 Australia. We're broadcasting through YouTube, Radio FM 88 Australia, Andrena, Forrest. We're also going on to X as Radio FM 88 Aussie. Also on Facebook channels as Radio FM 88 Australia or Dreaming the New Dream. Now, without further ado, interesting. It's going to be a fantastic talk tonight. It's nothing better than having someone who's gone through it all and shares it. So without further ado, I'm going to my co-host and partner, Andrena.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Good day. Welcome wherever you are in the world on the eve of the Lionsgate portal, which is tomorrow. And today it's my great pleasure to have Andy and Reena on the show today. And I met Andy a long, long time ago in Glastonbury, many past lives now. So it's really lovely to have you both on the show today. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
Well, yesterday I received your beautiful book, Between Lives. I've only read a little bit, but I've really enjoyed what I've been reading. And I know you, Reena, you had a near-death experience in 2020, and that was on a path that led you to explore more, especially near-death experiences. And I know we had Christina on the show. Oh no, we've had two people that have shared their past life experiences and near-death experiences. So it's a fascinating subject. So do you want to give a brief intro, starting with Andy and then yourself, to how it's all come about? Because I know it's a huge subject, but if we just do like a little nutshell at the beginning so that we can really get into your sharing of your new book.
Well, I used to work in the computer industry, corporate, and so I was pretty much all in the brain and very little intuition. And one of the things that really started to wake me up was seeing a clairvoyant, and the clairvoyant said to me, "You didn't like playing rugby, did you, when you were younger?" And when I was at school, I was always picked for the first team to play rugby, and in the UK in the middle of winter, it's not particularly pleasant and the ground's frozen. So I used to always sort of say in my mind, I hope they don't pick me, I hope they don't pick me. Of course, I didn't tell anyone, not even my parents, because, being a young boy, you kind of like pretend, you really enjoy it. And I thought, how did she know this information? And I hadn't even been thinking about it for years and years. And then went on to say, well, the other piece of information is that you're going to be doing some work in the future with Cathars, and you'll have people lying down in front of you. I thought, Cathars? Who are they? And I later discovered this was an early branch of Christianity who believed in reincarnation. And of course, as a past life regression therapist, I'm working with past lives, so that's the connection there. And of course, they're laying down when I do my work. So it was like a message had come through to me and made me inquire, where did that come from? And what other things are there about my life that, I could find out about if I've just got an open mind?
So I was born and raised in Malaysia, and I grew up a Hindu. So for me, past lives was a fact of life. The grass is green, sky is blue, past lives are real. And so when I went to university, I actually did my university in Australia, in Adelaide. I did. I majored in psychology, and when I graduated from psychology, I realized that I wasn't in the space to serve in that capacity. So then I did an MBA in Australia as well, and then I worked in Asia Pacific in the media industry doing public relations. And after about 10, 12 years, I got bored of doing public relations. And my mentor said, it's time. If you're bored doing public relations in the media industry, you're better off getting out of public relations altogether. So I then decided to go back to my, the psychology, the healing aspect of everything. And I was in Singapore at that time, and there was a gentleman called Andy Tomlinson who advertised his course where he married psychotherapeutic techniques with past lives. And I thought, oh my God, that's perfect. Perfect marriage, pun intended.
Love it.
And so, I mean, Andy Tomlinson is very shrewd. So he took my fees for the training, and then he decided to marry me. And that's how I got deeply involved with Andy's academy as well. And I was teaching between lives, and that's how I ended up in the UK. And then in 2020, as you mentioned, I had my near-death experience, which just expanded my mind and my knowledge all that more.
Would you like to share that experience? And does it, because I know it's not that long ago, really, is it? 5 years. Is it still really fresh in, when you share what happened, because obviously I've read the story, is it still really fresh in your mind, or is it sort of more of a distant memory? Because I know some people say, I left my body and I could see this and this, and that might have been 20 years ago, and it's so still there in their consciousness.
For me, because it happened in real time, and it was such a turning point, a major turning point in my life, that it's still very, very fresh in my mind, and it's something that I won't forget. Do you know what I mean? Because
yeah, of course.
Such a deep impact on me. So it all happened on the 27th of March, 2020. The date is so fresh in my mind because at that time it was my dad's birthday. I'm very, very close to my dad, which is why I've kept his first name is my surname. So I've kept his name. So it was Dad's birthday. And then I released another book called The Magdalene Lineage. And but I was in bed. And I thought I was in bed because I had burnout. But about 5 days later, what I realized was that there was I felt like two metal bands pressing around my chest. And I found it really difficult to breathe. And at that point, I realized that I had COVID. And COVID at that point was so early. It was such early days of COVID. Nobody knew what was happening with COVID, apart from the fact that people were going to hospital, they were intubated, they were isolated, and then, in little dark rooms, and then they all died. That was the message from the media: COVID equals death. And I didn't want that for me. So I turned to Andy and I said, look, I think I've got COVID. No matter what happens, is it okay if I stayed here at home? And Andy was very sweet because in those days, you had the lockdown, and so it was just Andy and I and the dogs in the house. But Andy said yes, and he picked up the burden of taking care of me. So apart from, cleaning myself and going to the bathroom, Andy did everything for me. And because I was in bed, I couldn't get out of bed. I was so fatigued. And there were a few times when I thought I was going to die because I couldn't breathe. And, I had little panic attacks. But then it was the 10th of April when Andy sort of at night, he came, he said goodnight to me, and then he took the dogs and he went on up to his room. And I reached over to turn off the light. And this was so fresh and so it was, it's so lucid in my mind that I knew that when I closed my eyes, I wouldn't open them again. And there was such a peace and a calm that fell over me. So it was almost like with that knowing of dying, there was peace, because another part of me took over almost. So my eyes closed, but then there was still that little observer self that popped up. And immediately, I think anyway, because timelines just didn't make sense at this point, there were 5 beings, light beings, standing at the foot of my bed. And they look like, Bunsen burner flames, that color, Bunsen burner flames. And they basically went through, they said, it's your time now. You have to come with us. And they did a quick review of my current life, especially my childhood, because that's where my biggest woundings were. They did a bit of healing. And suddenly I was pulled out of my body, and I was going into this space of expansion. And as I was pulled, it felt like I was caught in an ocean riptide. I had no control over it. And as I was being pulled, like all these worries and concerns, at that time, like, I have to do the promo for the books, and, my website needs to be ready, but I'm sick, I can't do anything. Like all those worries were on me, but they all just dropped away. It was so interesting, because I felt like, things was that important in life, but it really wasn't important when you are going through this transition. And so I would call that, as those things fell away, I felt like this huge expansion of myself. And I felt a peace and a freedom that I had never felt before. And it was, for me, actually quite a beautiful experience. And the other thought that was going through my mind as this was happening was, oh my gosh, this big thing is happening to me and nobody knows. I can't tell anybody. I'm going through it alone. And I thought, oh, okay. And then the beings then showed me the earth, and they said to me, and the earth had a grid of smog, like smoky grid. And they said, oh, why do you humans suffocate yourselves? and at that point, I was going through my own thing, and I was just kind of nodding, because, here I was going through something else. And then they said to me, okay, well, it's time to go further now. And I dropped everything, all my attachments, everything that was connected to me, I had dropped. But there was just this one aspect. And what I couldn't bear was for Andy to come down in the morning and see my lifeless body without having, because he would have been shocked. I didn't want him to feel any guilt, or whether it was his fault, because, like I said, COVID at that time, nobody knew what was happening. And so I said to the beings, I said, can I please have 10 minutes? I need to write Andy a note, because I wanted to tell him, look, this is what's happened. I love you. This is not your fault. It's just my time, sort of communicate what the beings had told me, and sort of, put the note there and then sort of head off. And the being said, no, you either come with us now or you go back. And so I thought about it really hard, because it was so tempting, because that sense of peace and freedom is unreal. It was something that I've never experienced before, and I still feel it. I can't put it in words. And but I just didn't want Andy to suffer or struggle, as it were. And so I chose to come back.
Lucky you. Because you, I mean, I've heard people say in the past, like, you're given a choice, they want you to come that way because there's more you can do over the other side, so to speak. And yet there's still plenty for you to finish off down here. So did you find it quite a hard choice, or was it, no, I need to go back to be with Andy and complete what I need to complete?
It's interesting, because as part of that process of moving on, one of the questions I did ask the beings was, but I have so much left to do here, because in my mind, I had to do the promo for the book, and then there was another book coming out, and I'm sitting there thinking, my work's not done yet. And they said, no, your work is finished. You can, like, your earthly work's finished. You can continue, in this expanded place, or you can do it here. So that was the choice I was given. At that point, with my ego consciousness, and let's call it the soul consciousness, when I was in my soul consciousness, it totally made sense. But when I came back into my body, I'm still, it's kind of making sense a little bit. But that depth of understanding is not there. Mm. So I had a choice, and I came back because I could do the work either here or there.
So do you feel that it's given you a completely different outlook on life and the work that you're doing because you've been through that experience?
Oh, yeah. I mean, this has totally changed my life. I mean, one of the things I realize now is that our greatest currencies are our energy and our time, because these are the two things we cannot get back. And to live, I mean, I'm living much more intentionally now because I feel like I have a second chance. Mm-hmm. And so I'm very, very careful with how I spend my time and my energy, with whom I spend my time and my energy with what I'm doing. And I have very, very firm boundaries about that, which I used to not have before. I'm also feeling like a pull of my heart a lot more. Does that make sense? Yeah, and I'm doing what my heart wants more than what my what I think I should be doing. I'm just following more the subtle energies around. And it's also interesting because when I came back into my body, that expanded sense energy of mine was still very, very expanded, and it was very subtle, and I was picking up things, very, very subtle, intangible energies everywhere. People would call it being psychic, but I call it picking up intangible energy. So, for example, it was, I think, a couple of days just after my near-death experience, I was in my bedroom and on the balcony in my bedroom, and my neighbor was mowing his lawn. And I was watching him, and then Andy came up to me, and then he said, "Oh, what's going on?" I said, "Oh, our neighbor's having legal issues." And I was just picking it up. And Andy said, "Well, how do you know?" I said, "Well, I'm just picking it up. I don't know. He's mowing the lawn. He's got legal issues. Like, I don't know what to tell you." And about a week later, Andy went out into the garden, and he bumped into the neighbor, and the neighbor complained to him about his legal issues. And what I realized was, this guy was obviously thinking about it, and he was putting it out there like a big ripple. And because my expanded consciousness was there, and I was picking up, on his intangible ripples, and it was kind of filtering back into my brain. So that's when I also realized how much intangible energy there is out there in this world, and to pay more attention to that than the loud, the more tangible stuff, senses that we're really used to.
So do you find you're getting more and more of the senses and picking up things more now than you did then, since that experience?
Yes, I am definitely getting more, but I've managed to, because when it's so big, everyone is releasing energy into their little ripples. Everyone has thoughts, everyone has emotions, and it started to get really overwhelming initially for me. So I've had to actually sort of fence myself in a little bit so I don't pick up too much, and like it's not so overwhelming. So I've had to learn to manage that. But yeah, I am picking up more of the subtleties now.
Yeah, because it's like being an open receiving station, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. And it's too much.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that. But I know, like, we used to do funeral work a long time ago, and we always used to say to people that you've been promoted, And when God calls you, or divine, whatever you want to say, you can't say, can I have another week? I just need to finish that, or I need to do that, or, you know, I want to finish that. There's no 5 minutes, weeks, or 2 weeks. When you get the call in, you're promoted and that's it. So it's interesting what you said, you know, could you go back and have just finished this off? And there was a no. I mean, so from the beings of light, for you asking for a little while to go back and say, you know, you think, well, it sounds a bit silly, really, doesn't it? In the nicest respect.
It does, because I think in that expanded sense, you know, they don't really, you know, it's not their issue, right? They don't care.
No.
But my little world, you know, this was really, really important. And they were like, well, you can go back to your little world, or you can come back here. And I chose to come back to my world.
Well, I'm very glad you did, so that you're here now.
Oh, thank you.
So, right. So for people that, I mean, I've had a sort of couple of pass or hypnosis and things like that, but I can't say for me, it's not a path I followed, and I didn't feel when things happened, it was really me. It was a funny, you know, that was where I was then. So what would you say to people to explain more about, you know, past lives and regression and the work that you do, you know, and consciousness and all of these things? You know, there's so much going on. Like, we are now going into the new earth. You know, the new earth has been birthed, and we're all working through different stages and what have you. So there's so much going on at the moment. So where would you like to start with? Somebody that doesn't really understand hypnosis, or has never had a session, you know, going into their consciousness and what it involves, and what is out of it for people.
Okay, well, there's two reasons why people would explore that. One of them is for a therapeutic reason, or they want to find out more information about themselves. Perhaps, as Reena brought up the word soul, perhaps call it a soul level. Just coming back onto the therapeutic side, the story I have was, after I'd finished all of my training as a psychotherapist, I'd asked once during that 4 years of training, what do you do if someone wants to experience a past life? And this is going back quite a number of years ago, where before past lives really became quite so popular as they are now. And I was told, just treat it as a metaphor. So that was the extent of my training. One of the very few first clients I had said to me, I keep having these thoughts about Venice. I wonder if I've had a past life about it. Could you do a past life regression? I thought, oh my goodness, how do I do that? So anyway, I managed to get her into a past life, and it turned out that she was in Venice, and she was a lady looking after prostitutes that used to service all of the sailors. And in that society, she was the lowest of the low. And when she came out of that session, it was quite unusual, because normally people remember everything about it. But because it was my first session, I think I'd taken her to too deep a level of trance, but I'd recorded it all. I said, look, you know, just take away and listen to the recording. And she came back, and I met her about a week later, and she was a very elderly, prim lady. And she said, I don't know if I can talk to you. I said, oh, what's wrong? Thinking, perhaps I'd done something technically wrong with the recording. And she said, well, I got all my friends round to listen to this, and they all found out that I was the keeper of prostitutes. She said, I'm not happy about that at all. And it does raise one of the things about when people go into past lives is that it's often a complete surprise for them. And you know, people aren't going back into being kings or queens or famous people. Often they are very common people, but there's some sort of issue. Perhaps it's an emotional issue, or perhaps some aspect of the past life which was incomplete. And the other aspect about past lives is that people do feel the emotions and the sensations. I had a colleague, well, he turned out to be a colleague, in Lawton, who's written several books about past lives, and he came to me initially and said, look, I've had one past life regression, but I'm not sure whether it was real or not. Because there are quite a number of people who offer to do past lives that haven't really been professionally trained. He said, I really want to know, are past lives real? So I said, oh, well, we'll make the intent to go into one of your past lives, which will help you decide that. And he went into a past life where he was being tortured and his fingernails were being pulled out one by one. And I did dwell a little bit longer than I would do normally. I normally go through quite quickly events like that, simply because he said he wanted to be absolutely sure it was real. And when I brought him out of the session, he said, I could feel all the sensations, I could feel the emotions. He said, I'm totally convinced past lives are real now. So there's that aspect of past lives, but from a therapeutic point of view, the therapists aren't trying to prove or disprove past lives. They simply just allow whatever material it is to come up and to work with it for some sort of therapeutic purpose. I mean, for example, I had a client who was a lady who was in an abusive relationship where she felt powerless. And it turned out in her current life, her parents had abused her sexually and physically. So her whole life, or her whole current life, was all about being in relationships where she was powerless. And went into a past life where she was a Victorian girl from an orphanage, and eventually was rescued by a rich Victorian, and he started to abuse her. And she said, what can I do? Because in Victorian England, girls didn't have any money or property. She was with someone who was considered to be very respectable and well known. So she had to take all these beatings. And one of the ways of working therapeutically is to give clients an opportunity to express things or to do things differently, so they can start to find the power, if you like, that had been taken away from her. So through transformation techniques, she was able to push away and shout at the Victorian gentleman. And then with transformational work in the current life, she was then able to stand up to her current partner and say, treat me well or leave, which may sound very simple, but when someone is powerless, it's probably one of the hardest things to do. And he left, and she was able then to engage in new relationships, having found this power. And this power came from really going all the way through to the past life and discovering what the cause of the issue was, finding a way of how to do things differently, and bringing that into the current life in a helpful way. So that's one of the ways that past lives could be used. Again, with her, she could feel the emotions and the physical sensations that were happening, not to an extreme level, but enough for her to know that it was real. But the other reason that people may want to explore past lives is to understand more about who they really are. And this really goes beyond past lives, and it was some work pioneered by a lovely American called Michael Newton, who found that when people go into very deep hypnosis, once they go through a past life death, they start to explore what appear to be soul memories between lives. And he called this life between life regression, or I refer to it as between life regression. And this was one of the areas that we were really interested in, Reena and myself, because could it be very similar to the near-death experience? But just to give you an example of why people would want to do that, and I'll let Reena talk about that comparison. I had a client who came, she was a Canadian, and her husband had died 6 months earlier, and she was finding it very difficult coping with life. And she felt that if she kind of understood more about her soul purpose, it may help her in some way. So we took her into a past life, and in the past life, she was a lady, husband had gone to war, he died, and she'd given up on life. And after about 6 months, she died, which is like a form of suicide when people kind of completely give up on life. And once she'd gone through the death point and she let go of the body and had the experience of moving out of the body into this expanded consciousness, she was met by a spirit guide. Spirit guides are beings of light that are here to help and advise in the lives that we have. And the spirit guide kind of like crossed its arms and said, this is the third time you've ended life with suicide. And because the spirits of light can show themselves either in physical or energy form, and for her it was shown in physical form. And then she met the husband from the past life, who turned out to be also her husband from a current life. And the two of them went off to plan the next life. And in the life, which is the one that she's in at the moment, she decided that she needed to be more independent, and her husband would die. But what he would get is he needed to learn patience. So she would help him when he was setting up businesses by just being patient so they'd be successful. And then when he died, she would then have the opportunity to be able to work through and get on with life without giving up. And of course, that inspired her when she came out of the session, and she was able to change her outlook completely about life and engage in life in a much more meaningful way.
Amazing.
Very good.
Yeah.
Do you find there's many, when you work with clients, do you find there's many that are carrying issues, excuse me, from a past life that they've brought into this life, and this is where you help clear that to free them up, really?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, a lot of what happens is sometimes past lives can be complete. So whatever people came down to learn about, and often if they've met, if you like, what was the plan for that life, then often the passing is very, very straightforward. But sometimes when something is incomplete and they didn't achieve the life plan, like the lady who gave up on life, her life plan there was to be able to overcome the sadness of loss and engage in life, and she hadn't. And it's her choice as a soul to really come back and to try that again, so she gets it right. Try to change the circumstances, maybe change the sex or relationships, and other souls are there to help to go through and do that. So there's not many people that have been through all of their lives without something that's incomplete. So most of us are working through remnants from past lives. Sometimes it can be recurring emotions which are clear. Sometimes it can be physical sensations that come through. It's almost like the universe is bringing to our attention something that's not right. And if people go to the source of it and are able to transform it, the symptoms just change overnight because the soul has been able to get the learning that it needs.
So in Hinduism, what we believe is that this particular life is like your snapshot, like a little photo of, the short aspect of your soul's journey. And so your past lives with the between lives experience is the movie. So sometimes, with some movies, you just need to have part 2 or it needs to continue on. So then it enters into this tiny little snapshot, which is this life.
But the interesting thing that I sort of touched on before, that I'm going to let Reena pick up if that's okay, was the similarity between the expanded consciousness that people experience in these reports of between life regression and near-death experience.
And I think one of the reasons why this came about was because I taught between lives regression. I trained therapists in between lives spiritual regression for the academy. And when I went through my near-death experience, when I was explaining it to Andy, I thought, I wonder if these this like I went through very similar stages to the initial stages of the between lives, the beings of light coming in, there was the healing aspect of it, there was the review, and then the pulling out of the body. And I wondered if that was being filtered through my brain, which is a brain that's very tuned to between life stages, or whether it was a universal occurrence. So when we went out and we looked for books and stuff about this, we couldn't find any. So Andy and I decided to take the research on ourselves, because Andy's academy, we have the graduates' case studies where they actually have to list out, the stages that their clients go through. And then we looked at pioneers in the near-death experience space. We looked at accounts, like hundreds of accounts that Dr. Pim van Lommel pulled together about near-death experience accounts. Dr. Bruce Grayson, he pulled them together. Dr. van Lommel is from the Netherlands. Dr. Grayson is from the US. And then we also used Dr. Peter Fennick, who is from the UK. So we had about 500 between life cases from around the world taken at different times. And we also had about nearly 400 near-death experience accounts from around the world taken at different times. And we realized that actually these stages from all these accounts are very, very similar. They correlate. So it just shows that there is something more than our physical body, because you've got the between lives regression, which is one process, and then you've got the near-death experience, which is yet another process or state of being that says the same thing, that our souls expand, and that there's an expansion of consciousness. And then we took it further and we said, okay, so what happens if so there's an expansion of consciousness, so what? And then we realized that there's an evolution of that consciousness, and that's part of that past life, as part of that movie. Our soul continuously learns, continuously expands, continuously grows. And then, like you said, at this time, it's such a pertinent time, because there is an expansion and an evolution on a global level. So what does that say for our souls? We can also evolve our souls without going through something as extreme as a near-death experience. We can do it whilst we are in the body. And that's how, that's basically the reason why we wrote that book, Between Lives.
Fascinating. It's amazing how like both your different experiences, and you've put them together in such a way that it makes total sense. So I'm looking forward to reading the rest of it. So with the new consciousness, I mean, is it new consciousness, or is it consciousness that we're fully aware of? And you're saying it's a new consciousness, or are you saying because of all the changes that are happening on the planet now, this is like the new way?
I think we can I take this? So I'll take this first, and then I'll just pass it on to Andy. So if we look at it, and I'm not an astrologer, but we have to bring in astrology here. If we look at Western astrology, we are moving astrologically from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius. And every time, and this movement of ages takes 2,200 years. So the last time we moved ages, it was from the age of Aries to the age of Pisces. And that's when Jesus came along. And he shifted the consciousness more to a one loving God consciousness. And before that, it was from the age of Taurus to the age of Aries. And when that happened, there was Moses. Moses shifted the consciousness from, multiple polygamous gods to a one more judgmental God. Jesus came, was a loving God, and then now we are moving to a different consciousness. But the best part is, according to astrologers, this whole cycle not only is a 2,200-year cycle where we're moving from one age to another, but it's actually a 26,000-year cycle where we're starting, because we're starting a whole new precessional rotation again. So it's going to be a big shift. But if you look at the Vedic astrology as well, right now we are in Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga is, according to Vedic astrology, is the dark ages, where it's the most dense. But at this point, we are also moving out of Kali Yuga, and we are ascending our consciousness. Some Vedic astrologers say we're going into the Satya Yuga, which is termed as the golden age. But some astrologers, Vedic astrologers, are saying we're going to the Iron Age, and then we'll go up to the Silver Age, and then we'll go to the Golden Age. But no matter what they're saying, there is a shift in consciousness that is supported by astrological events. And in our view, what we see is happening is that the earth is going to go through this shift no matter what. And the earth, it's being supported because we're just being bombarded by a lot of high vibration energy that's coming in. And we are all energetic beings, right? Our whole body, our thoughts, our emotions, everything that we put out there, that subtle, intangible energy, that's all energy. So when we are constantly bombarded by high vibration energy, there is huge agitation. It's almost like we taking a carpet, a dusty carpet, and we're sort of doing that, we're agitating it, and all the dust comes out, and then you're lifting under the carpet and you're seeing, things that you don't want to see, but we're cleaning it all out. Right? That's the whole reason why everything is being pushed to the surface. And this is why we see so much, well, let's call it drama out there.
Yeah.
Right? There's like extreme polarization. There's so much drama because, our whole energetic place that we live in is being agitated. But in doing that, what we are seeing is, are we resonating with this? Are we resonating with that? What systems are coming down? What do we have to change? How, what belief systems we have to change? What conditionings do we have to break so that we can then move into this new phase, into the age of Aquarius or into the Golden Age or the Iron Age, whichever one you want to believe in. What we need to go into this new phase in a clear way that's in total resonance with the vibrations that's coming in. And so this is where we are saying that, this is where the new vibrations, the new consciousness is being birthed.
Totally. Because, we're all, a lot of us are aware now that more and more people have an awareness that there's something's going on, that they've been fed a lot of untruths or lies. There's a lot of unrest with, when people are finding out what's really going on and how they've been lied to. But on the other hand, more and more people are finding their inner being and doing the inner work and not relying on other people outside of themselves for their information, because we have got it in between, and is tuning into our own energy and our own vibration, isn't it?
Yes. And there's just, I'll just say this thing and then I'll pass it to Andy. And there's also the intangible energy. So a lot of people are listening to the words, but not so much of the emotion, the emotion that's coming behind the words. There is a really amazing gentleman called, and I think his name is David Hawkins. He wrote a book called Power versus Force. And in this book, he actually matched out the frequency of emotions. So he said, the lowest frequency, the emotion with the lowest frequency is Earth. Sorry, it's not Earth. The emotion with the lowest frequency is shame. Sorry. And I was thinking of something else when I was talking. And the emotion with the highest frequency is enlightenment. And so if you can hear what people are saying, but what emotion we are feeling based on what they're saying, that gives you an indication of the frequency level of the words. Does that make sense? So
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so if someone is saying something that's making you feel guilt, then you know that intention that's coming out, the intangible intention that's coming out, is to lower your frequency. Whereas if someone is saying something that's going to empower you, then those words, that intention, the intangible intention, is to raise your frequency. And so I'm using this method now to discern that and to sort of shift away and clear away anybody who makes me feel lower frequency emotions. And I'm tending to move towards words, media organizations, people who are helping me stay in a different frequency.
It's a little bit like when Reena was telling the story when she was leaving the body, as she was letting go of things that weren't really important or the wrong sort of frequency, and she was able to expand her consciousness. And a lot of moving to the new consciousness is to be able to start to do that ourselves. I mean, perhaps a way of describing what's happening, I'll begin to a metaphor. It's almost like we're in the bottom of a valley with big industrial chimneys pumping out smoke, and we're coughing and spluttering, and we just know there's something about being in the bottom of this valley that's not right. And nearby there's a mountaintop where at the top of the mountain all the air is perfectly clear, you can see in the distance, and it's a peaceful setting. But somehow you have to navigate from this valley up to the top of the mountain. And if you could see where you're going, that'd be quite straightforward. But unfortunately, there's like a mist in between. So as people start to go into the mist, they're not too sure where to go. And some of them go around in circles, some of them ending up going back, and some of them slowly find a way forward. And to get through the mist, we have to use our internal guidance, our intuition. So a lot of the work that Reena and I do are working with people to help them develop their inner compass to make it easier for them to do that. And we've done that through the book that you introduced before. We do workshops, retreats to help people do that. And I know lots of other people are helping people develop that inner compass, because without it, it's very difficult to know where to go. Because if you're by yourself in the mist, you need a compass to really tell you which direction to walk in.
Yeah. Mm. And also when it comes to control uses fear, control uses guilt, and control uses shame. And so if there is anything that's coming out, if you don't do this, this will happen, and then you feel fear, that is not the vibration of the new consciousness, right? So we just disengage from that. If you do this, then this horrible thing will happen. And if you feel shame, again, disengage and move to something else. That's how we are actually navigating, this shift of consciousness, as it were.
Mm. Right, I saw a couple of questions, Jeffrey, that you put up. Right. Thomas says, so near death, when you technically die and you get revived, would you say you got revived?
Yeah, I got revived, but I didn't get revived via, medical means. I came back into my body, yes. But technically, near-death experience is when your heart has stopped beating, yes.
We are in the silicon age.
He's been a smart ass, I think.
I don't know what silicon age is.
No, normally. Yeah.
I think that relates to so many females getting breast implants and bloody bums and silicon age. I think that's what he's referring to.
I mean, I don't know about the breast implants, but I mean, it's interesting about the AI because according to astrologers, and I'm not an expert in this, so this is just hearsay, the age of Aquarius is going to be an increase in technology. So, there you go. I don't know enough about that.
But it's like all tools, they can be used in a helpful way or an unhelpful way. For example, a gun, that could be used for defense if necessary, or it could be used to go and attack people, or a knife could be used to cut meat, or a surgeon, or it could be used by someone attacking. So it's not so much the tool, it's more the intent of the people who are managing it that's important. And as more people wake up and start to use these tools in a helpful way that enriches our lives, then it serves a useful purpose.
What was it Carol said there, Jeffrey? Could you put it back up, please? Why do light workers often have such difficult lives when a little more help and guidance from spirit will enable them to work better and assist so many more?
Well, I think perhaps because light workers are starting to wake up and are starting to realize that there's things that they need to clear to raise the vibration, whereas a lot of other people are still asleep and they're living in, if you like, the old consciousness. There's help available to everybody if people ask. I mean, you and I do a lot of work with light workers that come in and we help them. And there's a lot of colleagues that we have that do the same as well. I mean, for example, regression therapy and past life therapy. There's a lot of wonderful therapists around. And, their role is to help light workers when they're ready to start to work through these emotional issues and to and start to embrace the new consciousness. So it's something that's available for everybody, but sometimes we hold ourselves back. And maybe sometimes it's the conditioning, that, conditioning has a really big impact. Just to give you a little simple example, I found when I was in corporate, I could never say the word I want. And it's quite an assertive way, I want you all to leave the room because it's on fire, but if you can't say I want, you say, please could you, and it'd be really nice if you could all go towards the outside of the room. It's not very assertive. And I couldn't understand, why can't I say I want? And I found out my two sisters couldn't say it either. And when we were young, Mum and Dad used to say, I want, don't get.
Yeah.
So it was programmed out of us. And yet we were blind, or I was blind to it. So I think there's a lot of limiting beliefs that we're holding that we don't actually realize that are holding us back. And they're not actually there, but it's our perception that they're there. Whereas in reality that there is help everywhere. And people just really need to be able to ask for it with an open heart, because the intention isn't to punish anyone down here. The intention is to help them work through their life issues and raise the vibration and embrace the new consciousness.
And sometimes, where there is the most lack is where our growth is. So, for example, I come from Malaysia and I love the Malaysian food. And then when we moved here, where we're living now, which is in the country in the UK, it's beautiful. I love living here, but oh my God, I can't find Malaysian food anywhere. And because in Malaysia, it was so easy. You just walk out, you can go to a street stall and you can get something really tasty, really filling, really nutritious, and then you come back. I never needed to learn how to do it. But here, when there's this lack of Malaysian food, I've had to learn to cook my Malaysian food so that I can enjoy it. But in there lies the growth and the evolution. So, sometimes I think a lot of light workers, they come down with this, because when you're in the spirit realms, in between life state, you can say, yeah, I plan to do this, I can do this, I can do that, I can do that. It's like us being on a flat surface in the comfort of your home going, yep, I can climb Mount Himalayas and, I'll be Mount Everest and I'll be all good, it'll be easy. And then when you get to Mount Everest, you're like, oh my God, why did I even bother doing this? So it's almost like that, right? You're in the spirit realms, everything's easy. Then you come down and you're like, oh my God, why? But therein lies the growth and that evolution.
Hey, while you guys are talking, I'm picking up the fact that there's a game that came out back in the 60s called Monopoly.
Well, Monopoly?
Yeah. So it's almost like saying, here's a software program, and people, because we didn't have TV at the time, but you had radio. And so you sit around, you would either play cards or you play this new game Monopoly, and it was all about acquisition. And it seems like the program was, you find a partner, get married, go and buy a house, have kids, do the 21st birthday parties, get the marriages, have the grandchildren, and then get promoted. And so it's an interesting program. The thing is that, from what I can gather, the light workers have got to come in and somehow or another play that game of getting accommodation. The three basic requirements that the Jewish people follow is housing, clothing, and food. The three prime programs that humanity requires. So for a light worker to come in and then transmute that whole monopoly program of acquisition of property and paying rates and going past jail, you get $200 or Centrelink or whatever you want to call it, to get to a point where the real masters, they could manifest, whether it's food or whether it's drink, or they could teleport themselves. That's the real program that humanity seems to have lost, and it requires the awakening of light workers to break through. But they really need the early wave of people from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. I mean, the flower power people to sort of bring love and sort of transmute. It keeps coming with waves of people to actually rebuild on what's been put forward by the previous wave of light workers. So you just got to keep raising that vibration. That's my summation, listening to you guys. But the one that really came out of left field was, have you ever done any future lives?
Future lives.
Future. To find out what they've gone and transmuted.
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain element of future with the between life regressions where part of the planning on what would be the current life is souls are normally given a choice, maybe 2 or 3, or even if there's just one life offered, they still have a choice whether to take it or not. There's free will that's involved with that. But it's just the possibility. It's like what the major part, so for example, if someone wants to work with powerlessness, they may choose whether to have a strong physical body or a weak physical body. In other words, they're picking aspects of the life to fit the lessons they want to learn. But how that evolves is really up to them. Now, there are people who do future progressions, but it needs to be remembered that with a future progression, it's only a possibility, because every minute of every day we're changing, and that future life might be completely different. Yeah. And I personally found there isn't a need to go into future possibilities, that to go into the past to learn where things went wrong and to bring it into the present is enough to bring about a change. Some of my colleagues think that future lives may inspire people to go through the change. I have no evidence for that or not, but it just doesn't resonate with me to do that. But certainly any future life progression would certainly be just a possibility, not any form of reality. Otherwise, if it was a reality, we would be living the past, present, and the future at the same time. And that's a bit of a minefield to go down, while we're in the human body. It's much easier just to think about a timeline of things in the past for us to learn on, and the current is for us to have our free will to decide how to respond to life situations.
So I can give a quick example of that. It's like we're all going through school because it's about growth and evolution of the soul. And, we may have a trajectory, after primary school, you go into secondary school, after secondary school, you go to university, we could have that trajectory. But then sometimes people drop out, sometimes people are held back, sometimes people skip a few classes or a few grades. So, and that's based on people's choices and free will. So that's why we say you may have a trajectory, but, nothing is set in stone until you actually go through those different classes or stages.
What's been the most amazing experience you've had in a client, in a past life that sort of surprised everybody, really? Have you had anything like that?
It's so interesting once you start exploring, you go into this line of work, you start exploring people's lives. Very few things actually surprise us because you see all types of, but I think one of the things that I am astounded by is how resilient a soul is, because we've seen tortures, we've seen the worst abuse, whether it's current life or past life abuse, and people are still standing up, they're still walking, they're still going through life, and they're getting through it, they're trying to learn their lessons. So for me, I think the most astounding thing is just how resilient and how strong a person is, like a soul is, even though their minds, their ego says, no, you're not, but their souls and, that spirit is so strong and so resilient.
Okay, so we're coming up to the hour. So is there anything else, words of wisdom or anything that you'd like to share before we finish today?
I'm looking at the wise master right here.
Oh, well, just a couple of tips to help you in your transition. The first is, and we mentioned this before, Reena said how these new energies are bringing emotions to the surface. Things that haven't been resolved are going to feel worse and worse. So I would just simply say, if you do have emotional issues come to the surface, work through them, clear them. There's a lot of do-it-yourself books that are helpful. There's a lot of therapists that are helpful. There's a lot of help around. But if you're holding on to these old emotions, it's going to lower your vibration and it's going to become more and more uncomfortable. And the other tip is, and Reena touched on it before when she talked about the vibrations of information coming to you. We're in the world of information overload, and a lot of this information, unfortunately, is a very low vibration. There's a lot of fear in there, and it's coming from official channels, mainstream media, social media, and discriminate and cut it out as much as you can. I mean, some people have even gone on information detoxes for a month, and they've just stopped social media, stopped mainstream media, and they still find out what's happening in the world, but they don't have all that energy impounded in them. Or you may want to start switching off some sources and switch and look for other sources, and there are other sources of news that have got a different vibrational content with them. So be very careful, because our own personal issues can lower our vibration, or energies that are coming from other people can lower our vibration. So those are the two top tips from me.
And I think for me, when I had my near-death experience, that sense of peace and freedom is something that is unreal and something that I will hold on forever. So I would say prioritize your peace there will always be something out there trying to pull you into other agendas, you know. And if you can maintain your peace, then move, you know, go towards something that keeps your peace. But if something is going to make you feel worried, if something's going to make you feel anxious, if something is making you feel fatigued, you know, our quality of life is more important than any of that. Quality of life is it. So just maintain that peace, prioritize that peace. And I think that would be my take on all this.
It's funny you should say that, because with having no Wi-Fi, technical issues and data and phone and you name it, it was happening. I spoke to Microsoft chat line for about an hour and a half on Wednesday. No, that was yesterday. No, Tuesday. And then they suggested I get onto Samsung. So I actually spoke to a lovely guy in the Philippines, and he was so helpful, and he took me through all these options on the computer, on the phone, here, there and everywhere. And this is like, and I also had my friend Kimberly sent me all sorts of stuff to work through. And she said, try this. And nothing was happening. And frustrations were getting a bit tethered. But when I finished dealing with it all, I thought, well, normally I'd be really rattled. But I realized I was in such a sense of calm and peace about it all. It's just, well, for whatever reasons it's happening, I don't know the bigger picture. And then I went for a lovely swim in the ocean yesterday, a quick chilly swim, and came back. And another lady rang me from Samsung, and she did like remote on my phone. So she was going in through all the different options. And then so she said, all right, do this on your computer. And I did. And next thing, I'm back online again. So I was so glad.
You need to switch it off for a while. Maybe the universe is doing the right thing for you.
Yeah. But now I've got a backlog to catch up on. But anyway, I'm very happy. But normally I'd be ranting and raving about technology, blah, 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 blah. But I realized after speaking to all these people during the day that I still felt very calm and peaceful. Wow.
Yes, yeah. Because peace is what is resonating with you. If you feel peace, then you're in what is resonating with your inner soul, right? If you're feeling agitated, there's a dissonance. So that's why,
Totally. Okay, one last question. Have you got another book coming out between you?
Oh.
Well, Reena's got a book coming out, but then that's in the area of fiction rather than non-fiction.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a while away yet.
Yes, I am. I want to make that transition into fiction publishing now.
Oh, it's a bit different, eh?
Yeah.
Well, right. Well, if there's nothing else, it's been an absolute delight to have you both on the show, to see you both, and you sharing your stories and all about your book. It's been really lovely. I've really enjoyed it. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us both, Andrena and Jeffrey.
Yes.
We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Andrena. Thank you, Jeffrey.
And to all your listeners and your questions as well.
Okay. Well, same time, same place next week. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in.